Alright, I've got the right side ready to epoxy. This is pretty much all the body work. That rear door is going to get replaced, so I didn't do anything back there. Had one dent in the fender, one very minor one right there. I thought maybe the primer would get it, but I went ahead and put some in it anyway, just in case it didn't. I wouldn't have to do it later. Tiny one there. There were two creases in here. This is the start of the damage that went into the back door, so I pulled 3 or 4 studs right in here, pulled that crease out. There's also a crease up here. I took about 3 or 4 studs too. Wasn't quite as bad. I also got one little door ding back here, and there was some damage right back there. It was mainly just 2 dents, but I had to just bridge across that. I pulled 1 stud in each dent. Got a dent right here below the seam between the roof and the quarter. Got that blocked out and peeled back. I'm going to just epoxy all this right now. There was one really shallow dent there. Just going to epoxy that area. I sanded through it, and it's not going to need any filler. If I put any on it, it would just get sanded back off anyway. I had a couple really tiny dents here. Same thing, just going to put epoxy over all this right now until I can get to the point where I can prime all this. And do this now, and that's going to have pretty much all the body work done except for maybe the trunk lid. I think there's a little bit on it that might need to be done. I also got the grill out the other day when I took the front bumper off. This was just covered in rock chips, so I went ahead and just sanded all the way through it. Got the bottom edge, top edge, and inside. Everywhere it's still red is Scotch-Brite pad, scuffed. So I'm going to put epoxy over this whole thing and then the parts on the car. There were 2 tiny little rock chip dents here. I filled that in case the primer didn't get it, and there was a fairly deep dent right here in this body line. There's a body line that runs through here. This is flat, this is angled. It's right through the center. Just had to remake that. And that was really it. There was another small dent here, but I tapped it out from the backside with my body hammer. The rest of it's just going to be just get a good coat of primer. Probably put 2 coats of primer on this. Really doesn't need 3. Just give me something to sand. But the car will get 3 coats as soon as I get to that point. But I'm just going to epoxy all this for now. All right, little primer will be the next thing I do to the car. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do these two panels. Once these two, I'm only doing these two so I don't have so much area to cover to keep it wet, but after I do these two, I'm going to do front two here, and then I'll move to the other side. Trunk's going to need some metal work, so we're going to do that last. Once I get the sides primed, I'll come up here and I'll end up sanding back into the primer that I put on here, on each C-pillar, and I'll overlap that primer on the roof that I put on it over onto this so it'll stick, and I'll just feather all that together with the DA. We'll go ahead and get one coat on this. I've got a little bit of bare metal along the body line here, but the primer I've got is okay for a cut through. There's a little bit right here too. I've got screws in here plugging these holes up where the molding goes. I don't want to put too much paint inside there and build up enough paint in there where the pin won't go through from the molding. One here. Got the jam masked off where it won't go inside the car there. I'm going to have to go double check all my tape, make sure I don't have anything peeling back. It's been there for a couple days, but I'm going to go ahead and get the first coat on here as soon as I get it tacked off. It's already wiped down with Final Clean. Alright, it's tacked off, ready to go. I did go through and take a scuff pad to all the bare metal that I've got since it's been sitting there for a few days exposed. I did that before I wiped it down, so it's good to go. I just got it tacked, and I'm going to spray on one light coat here and let it flash for about 10 to 15 minutes. I'm using a little bit slower hardener in this because I've got such a large area to spray. It's about 75 in here. I've got the 80 to 90 degree hardener in the primer. I'm going to put one medium coat on it, let it sit up for about 15 minutes so I don't get any solvent penetration into anything on the car, since it is a single stage and I don't know if there's a hardener in the paint that's on it. So I don't want to get anything soaking in. I'm going to let that dry pretty good before I hit it the second time. I also use this primer as kind of a practice run for the paint job so I can get my stroke down, my pattern, mainly for the clear coat application later on. Let that go about 15 minutes. I'm doing some other parts in between these coats, so I'll come back to that now. Alright, I'm getting ready to prime this area here. I don't want to get primer down between the door and the fender all over the post and that inside edge of the fender that you can see when you open the door. So I'm taking some cardboard and I shoved it in here between the two, and I just ran a Sharpie down the body line, or the contour of the door actually. So I'm going to cut that out so that way it's almost flush with the car. That'll take up that gap. So I'm just going to trim this out with scissors and stick it back in that gap. Alright, it's back in there. I trimmed it. I don't want to push it too far, it'll fall in the door and I can't get it out. So it's probably sticking out 1/8 of an inch at the most. The primer will still lay down everywhere it needs to. Got to make sure, like these edges up here, I don't have any bare metal being covered up because I need to cover that bare metal. But back in here I had enough tape on the inside of the pillar there. I don't really need anything else there. I'm going to get some epoxy on this. Let that be sitting up. Alright, the epoxy's on. Been sitting up for about an hour now. Just got the urethane mixed up. And tack it off one more time. Start applying it. Alright, I'm going to give it 2 more wet coats, that'll be it. Here it is after the 3rd coat. Got the wheel and all back on it. Going to have to get the rocker panels off at some point. Didn't really need to take them off just yet, so didn't want to have them out loose. Rather just leave them on the car till they get to that point. Going to have to turn the car around now, and I'll work on the other side. That's why I had to get the wheel back on it and get everything where I can pull it out and turn it around. That's got everything on this side and the front end done. Bumper's been done separately. I'll flip it around. I'll do the rear bumper needs to be primed. I'll do some work on this trunk lid later on. It's going to be the last thing I do, but I want to get the whole body in primer. Other than that, got the other door put on the other day. This is the white door that I changed the color on. Hung that on, got everything to fit. I don't have the wiring and all in it yet. It's just a shell. I got it to fit, so now that I've got the hinges in the right place, I'm going to lift it back off the the pins, and I'll run the wiring in. I have to have the door off to get the screws in the wiring harness, so there's not enough room in there. So I'll pull it back off eventually, but I've got everything fit. It's just sitting on the pin, so it'll lift right back off and go back in the same place. So now that this is done, I'm going to turn it around, start sanding on the other side, and get that in primer, and then I'll go to the roof.